What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Wild Nutrition Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Heskett, and this is episode 116. This is going to be a little bit different. This is going to be some podcasts and life updates. So there's a few changes going on here early in 2024. Podcast isn't going anywhere, but potentially it's going to go on pause or just one episode a week for a little bit. There's just a couple things have come up, and I don't know if I can be consistent with, as I didn't get a Friday episode out. I don't think I did. And actually, I can tell you right now. Yeah, I did not get a Friday episode out. This episode's coming out late on the Monday. So there's been a few things going on. So for the month of February, it might just be one podcast a week, or it might be a full pause while we sort things out. Everything is good. It's just busy and something has to give. And so that's going to be today's podcast episode topic really quick as I talk about updates and lifestyles. So one thing is my back went out for the first time in a very long time this morning. It's an old deadlift injury around my right hip. I get sciatic pain down my right hip, and as it gets worse, it goes to the knee or the ankle. And if you get pain and you're like, oh, I have pain down my knee, and now it's in my hip. So the worse your sciatica is, the further down your leg it goes. So as it gets better, it's actually going to travel up your leg. So just so you know, with sciatic pain, as someone who's been very, very experienced with it since I was 18 was my first injury with my back. Yeah, it is maybe earlier, maybe it was 17. But it's not fun. It's not fun. So back pain is not fun to deal with. It's really annoying. This is not debilitating. I literally woke up this morning and I think I have I've never had an x-ray. I think I have a slip disc in there of some sort. So my right hip's just been tight, and I've was running up and down the hill in the back of our house with the snow that we got here in Pennsylvania with my daughter. We don't have an actual sled. So I was physically carrying her up the hill. And then we had this plastic container that was sturdy enough for her. And we were pushing her down that. Well, I did that. First day was probably 15, 20 times up and down the hill. The next day wasn't I think she only went 6 or 8 times. But still, it's a 30-pound toddler. You're walking up a hill on one side. And then I just felt stiff from before was something that I don't know what was happening. My hip was just feeling really stiff. So this morning I woke up and I went to kind of stretch my back out. And as I was leaning over to stretch it out, because I was basically doing an RDL right towards the bottom, all of a sudden it felt just my back gave. There's nothing supporting it. And all of a sudden my back just rounded without, and I couldn't do anything. It just happened really quick. And then reflexes kicked in and my body straightened itself out before I could even react. I was like, what the fuck was that? And I knew immediately, I'm like, fuck, I'm going to get sciatic pain all day from that, because that's the sign. So the actual, when it happens, it doesn't actually hurt. It just feels weird. And then it's 2 minutes later, I'm like, there it is. It's in the hip. So I've been stretching it out. I'll probably have to modify I was trying to hit legs early because I've been kind of slacking on them and try to push it earlier in the week. And I'm like, leg day is going to be Thursday, Friday now. Great. Probably Thursday. I'm not doing well with Friday workouts. So let's go over life and podcast updates. So that was my update with my back there. But there's some changes going on. So you guys will find out about that soon enough. But when it comes to your own life, things are going to pop up and you're going to have to adjust things. And there's only so much bandwidth that you have. So for example, potentially putting this podcast on pause. So while I love doing the podcast is not at a position where it can pay me through ads or through, even those of you who click on the affiliate links down below for Seeking Health, that's great, but I make 3% of sales. So if you buy $100, I make $3. if that. I think it might be less. So it's not much. I put it there. I use them not because I make the most money. There's affiliates where I could make 10, 15%, but I'd be upcharging you guys a lot, which I just feel is really sleazy. I can't do it. I know a bunch of people who do it, and there's good products out there, but when I see a whey protein that's like a 2-pound tub for $50, I'm like, Levels is like 60, $70 for a 5-pound tub. Like, why would I do that? Or same thing with the multivitamins. Like, why would I give someone like a crappier quality? So it doesn't pay. I don't get enough consistently. In fact, technically the podcast causes me to lose money. So something has to give, and just the bandwidth, editing, recording, doing all the things with the podcast. Because obviously you see that this is only like 15 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, but it takes longer on the back end to do things. If you don't know that, so now you do. And the longer the episode, often more editing times. So like most Monday episodes, to edit the audio and everything, it's not too long, but to upload it, go through the process, put it through the software I do to improve the sound of your voice and everything, and then download it, you're talking like an additional 20-ish minutes by the time everything is done. And then you can upload the podcast. Then you have to write out your, the show notes and all that stuff. So it's one of those things like I might be able to save 2-3 hours in a week so I can focus elsewhere. I'm not saying I'm definitely doing it. I'm just letting you know, like, if you see less, potentially I'm putting everything on pause because in terms of work-wise, potentially I'm going to have like a massive amount of work sent my way. So something that's going to take priority over the podcast. Same thing goes in your life. Sometimes things are going to come across and something has to give. Sometimes that's tracking your food perfectly. If you don't have the mental bandwidth, this is where people are like, I'm not willing to give an inch, but something will give. And temporarily pausing something isn't a problem. Like temporarily, like, oh, I was doing so good on my fitness. And then it's like, well, maybe temporarily you have to drop down to 3 times a week or 2 times a week if you have 5 times a week. Maybe temporarily you have to drop away, not track your macros for the next 4 weeks. Maybe you need to just go to portion control for the next 4 weeks if your goal is fat loss or maintenance, or your reverse dieting. There's things that sometimes you have to do because you won't have the bandwidth, whether it's actual time or maybe it's mental bandwidth, because a lot of times we forget the mental bandwidth. You will burn out. You can white knuckle things for so long, but at some point you're going to burn out. And what you don't want to do is like get through everything and be so mentally burnt out that you're like, yes, I can focus on the gym again. And then you get to that point and you're like, I feel like I've been through a war zone and I just need a mental break. Instead, it can take some pressure off. My wife and I talk about this often because right now she's not working out, with pumping, her job, taking care of the kids. And especially right now, our oldest is going through a phase where all she wants is mom. So past like 2 weeks, like I've been like taking her up, giving her a bath, like normal. I normally do that. But then when it comes to bedtime, she hasn't wanted any books. But when I turn off the lights, she starts screaming and shrieking, and only mom can put her down. So when we were doing it, we're both up there till like 9:30 at night, or my wife can take that on. So my wife's like not able to relax. She's like listening for our oldest, and I'm doing dishes because generally like I make dinner, whoever makes dinner, the other person does the dishes. Like that's how we kind of, do that. And then one person takes the youngest one, the other person takes the oldest. So the way it's going to work for going forward, I'm going to do dinner and dishes, and I make a lot of dishes, so I hate doing dishes. So maybe it'll help me reduce, probably not. But that's just going to be how it has to be temporarily. So my wife, like by the time she's done with that, she's down at 9. That's about the time my daughter goes to bed, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later, usually a slightly little later. And then she has to pump at 10. So where does that workout going to fit? The only time she has to relax and not be chasing after someone, trying to keep someone from getting hurt with all the toys or something, is from like 9 to 10. So it was one of those things, like there's just not the time. We can be physically active, like go for walks, do stuff on weekends, that kind of stuff. A lot of times she is up and walking and moving around on the weekends. But in terms of getting into the gym, into the garage, doing actual workouts, it is not possible. Well, it is possible. She could wake up earlier, but she pumps at 6. So she's getting up super early and her last pump is at 10. So it's like, okay. So she's getting limited sleep. And then we get disturbed sleep because we have 2 young kids. So where do you give? And you could put extra pressure and extra stress, which would reduce her supply, which she's trying to finish up in March. Or she could just not work out. That was what gave. And the hope is there's enough stored milk in March. Once we do the final count, we'll know about how many weeks are left. We'll probably do a final count next month in February, like end of February. So once we do that, then she'll be able to wean off, stop pumping, which means she will then get back literally between cleaning and everything, 2, 3, at least 90 minutes up to maybe 3 hours in the day back. Like, that's a lot of time. So then she can get in like workouts, even if it's like a 15, 30-minute workout. At that point, she can. But it's temporary. You plan on that. And the same thing goes for you in your life, is you can't always chase everything. And sometimes you have to look at what is realistically helping you move forward with your goals and everything. And what is something nice, fun, and maybe it is helping you somewhat with your goals, like this podcast. But it's not the biggest thing that's moving the needle. So I know that I see the memes online of like the corporate speak, like move the needle and 30,000 foot view. But we've been using those terms in the gym for a long time. So when it comes to your goal, like if your goal is fat loss, like what moves the needle the most? Like nutrition for sure. And then you would say like, okay, exercise and sleep would be maybe the next 2. And then it's like, but if people focus on supplements, like it's not really going to move the needle that much. It will somewhat, but it's not the biggest driver. So that's like, this podcast I view as kind of like the supplement. Like there's other things that need to start first, like prioritize those. And this, rather than like just telling you guys like, hey, podcast, like, instead of saying like just posting randomly or just one episode in your week and you're like, what the fuck? Why is there only like one episode coming out? Instead, let you guys know and then be like, hey, this is temporarily. Maybe late February or March, it's going to pick back up again. Definitely with guests. There's no guest for the next couple of weeks for sure. I do not have the time or the bandwidth to schedule that, do all that. I just don't, especially with running Alex's podcast right now and doing all the back end work on that. I just don't have the time for it. So that is some of the life updates. So this was a really quick episode. Just want to come on, let you guys know, give you a little bit of a life lesson there. And be like, it's okay sometimes not to. This is a health and nutrition website or podcast, not website, podcast. And sometimes it's okay not to focus on those things. Sometimes other things need to prioritize in your life. If you look at like the circle of wellness, I forget what that shit's called. Circle wellness of wellness. This is where like Joe Rogan, like Jamie would come in handy, but I can't. So yeah, circle wellness pops up. So when it comes to your wellness, you have emotional, physical, intellectual, spiritual, environmental, financial, social. So all those things play a role. So physical health is like your fitness, your nutrition, those things. But if everything else is not good, then we need to work on that stuff. So that's something to keep in mind. If you never looked at the wellness wheel or the circle wellness or whatever it's called, look it up and see where you're being, what part of your wellness is you're neglecting. Because say it's financial and you're always under a financial stress. Well, that stress, which is going to reduce your physical health, which is also reducing your emotional and intellectual health. So you can kind of come in and be like, hey, like these areas need improvement. And spiritual is spiritual, not religious. A lot of people, it will be religion. It doesn't have to be religion if you're not a religious person like myself. It can be other things, which that's not really my area of expertise. So I will let you figure that out. Again, we mostly focus on physical, but a little bit of emotional and intellectual on this podcast, but the other areas are important as well. For example, social, make sure you have a good connection of friends and family and everything else. And if you don't, that's an area where you should build up. And it doesn't mean like, like if you're like me, so I have 2 best friends. That's it. Like really, really close friends. I have 2. Some people, it's a whole bunch. My wife has a few really close friends. We don't have like a giant circle of friends. I'm very well connected and I'm good friends with a lot of people and I can trust a good amount of people. But in terms of like who will I text if I'm really struggling, there's like 2 people other than family. So, and some people, if you don't have that, we are social creatures. You need that support, whether it's, and you can find that through community, whether it's your physical local community or it's an online community. That's the power of online communities. Social media, using it in a positive way, is finding those communities where you thrive for specific things. For example, like it might be a hunting community if you're into hunting like I am, or it might be a workout one, or it might be a host of other things. That's a social thing. Anyways, look up the wellness wheel if you have not ever looked at that before, and just try to figure out where you need to make improvements. And it might be physical health, which is why you're listening to this podcast. It might be something else. Anyways, guys, again, podcast might be 1 episode a week. It might go on a full pause until March. There's things in the work. You will see that on social media. And obviously I will let you guys know here on the podcast, probably on a Friday episode, later, either in February or in March, once we pick back up. Anyways, as always, appreciate you guys and hope you have a good rest of your week.